Hello, welcome to the Address of Fear. If you love horror stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you're ready, let's get started. Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 in the town of Klingenberg, Germany. Her family was strongly Catholic, and Anneliese grew up adhering strictly to these religious values from a young age. Her parents always nourished her with love and did everything they could to provide her with the best education. As a child, Anneliese was known for being gentle and intelligent. However, when she turned 16, a series of strange and disturbing events began to unfold, events that would forever change the young girl's life. Anneliese's first symptoms began with severe headaches and convulsions. Initially, her family viewed this as just a common illness or stress, but over time these symptoms became more complex and terrifying. During the convulsions, Anneliese felt herself losing control, hearing strange sounds coming from her mouth, and displaying a gloomy change in her demeanor. The headaches intensified, but there was something far more disturbing. Anneliese began speaking in foreign languages. Neither her family nor Anneliese herself could understand what was happening. What was even more frightening was the sudden and brutal changes in Anneliese's behavior and mood. Sometimes, she would act cheerful and happy, only to suddenly become aggressive, screaming and rolling on the floor. She became hostile even towards her own family. She constantly felt as though she was being controlled by a foreign entity, and this sensation made her mental state even more difficult to bear. Anneliese also started reacting abnormally to religious symbols. For instance, she felt intense disgust towards crosses and the Bible, and just seeing them would frighten her. One day, when looking at a religious image, she began crying and trembling uncontrollably. All of this threw her family into great uncertainty and fear. At first, her family considered Anneliese's condition to be a psychological disorder. However, as time passed, the physical and mental aspects of her situation became far more complicated. Anneliese started behaving in ways that made her seem like a stranger to herself. She began speaking in a language resembling Old Arabic, trying to express herself in strange, unrecognizable ways. Anneliese's speech contained words and sentence structures she had never used before, and much of what she said was incomprehensible to her family. Later, investigations revealed that the words she was using belonged to a language once spoken but rarely heard in the modern world. As time went on, Anneliese's behavior became more dangerous. Her body was racked with convulsions, and she also displayed intense bursts of anger. On several occasions, she threatened her family and showed violent tendencies. But the most terrifying part was her statements about wanting to die. At times, while looking at herself in the mirror, she would scream in fear and say things like, "Let me go." Her family could not understand what was happening to their daughter, and their worries grew by the day. Eventually, Anneliese's physical state deteriorated significantly. She slowly began to refuse food, neglecting her personal hygiene and clothing. Her family considered seeking medical help, but each time, they delayed the idea. At one point, Anneliese's condition had worsened so much that her family stopped believing she was suffering from a psychological illness or some form of psychosis. With each passing day, her increasingly alien behavior showed that it was impossible for her to recover physically. Her family, in their desperation, began to seek a more traditional solution. They decided to take her to a priest and have a religious intervention. They began to believe that her mental state was due to possession by a demon. This belief was widespread in the Catholic community at the time, and calling upon religious figures for such cases was a common practice. At this point, Anneliese's family decided to consult with a priest. In a state of great fear and anxiety, they believed that an exorcism ritual was necessary to solve the painful condition their daughter was facing. From this moment on, the exorcism sessions would begin, and Anneliese's life would take a dramatically different turn. By 1975, Anneliese Michel's condition had worsened even further. The young girl could no longer express her pains and mental struggles to others, living in constant fear and darkness. Her physical and mental breakdown deepened the helplessness of her family. The family repeatedly sought medical help by visiting hospitals, but no treatment could heal Anneliese. With each passing day, her alienating behaviors became increasingly disturbing. At this point, the family's deep religious beliefs came into Anneliese's family began to believe that her condition was not a psychological illness, but the result of possession by a demonic entity. This belief, especially part of their Catholic faith, became a major motivation for seeking help from priests. In their deep sense of fear and desperation, the family chose to pursue the exorcism ritual as a solution. Towards the end of 1975, they contacted Pastor Arnold Renz and Father Richard Koenig. Both priests believed that Anneliese was indeed possessed by a demon. Pastor Arnold Renz was an experienced priest who had previously performed several exorcism sessions. Father Richard Koenig, though a newly ordained priest, agreed to conduct the sessions alongside Renz. Both priests believed that the psychological and physical symptoms Anneliese was experiencing were signs that she was under the control of a demonic entity. The family, sharing the same belief, decided to begin the exorcism rituals, convinced that their daughter had been overtaken by a dark power. The sessions began in 1975, with Pastor Arnold Renz and Father Richard Koenig participating. The two priests came to Anneliese's house and started performing the sessions every day. Initially, the exorcism ritual began with specially prepared prayers and hymns. It seemed that Anneliese was under some form of control. Over the course of the sessions, her behavior became increasingly dangerous. Yelling, screaming, speaking incoherently, and physically shaking uncontrollably became regular features of the sessions. Each session lasted several hours, during which Anneliese writhed in agony, moving as if she were being controlled by another entity. She claimed she was facing a demon who wanted to kill her and whom she had to fight. Her fear and anger towards religious figures intensified with each passing day. Her family internalized the priest's words, believing that each session would bring Anneliese closer to healing. During the sessions, Anneliese's body trembled violently, her back, arms, and legs contorting in strange ways. She screamed loudly, sometimes hitting herself against pillows and carpets. Physically, she was weakening and completely exhausted. She could not control herself, flailing in fear and anger. Visible spasms and bruises began to appear, particularly around her neck. All of this became more pronounced as the exorcism sessions continued. Anneliese's behavior became increasingly wild over time. She began to attempt self-harm in various ways. Simultaneously, during the exorcism sessions, she felt like she was another person, claiming that she was being controlled by another entity and speaking in a foreign language. A few times she began using Arabic words and constructing meaningless sentences about religious symbols. This was seen by the priests as further evidence of a demonic influence. The sessions continued with growing intensity each day. They became a severe and traumatic experience, far beyond the psychological symptoms she had experienced earlier. The family and priests saw Anneliese's condition worsening with each passing day. She believed she was being controlled by an entity and was suffering more and more. However, the priests were convinced that the exorcism ritual would only work this way, and thus refused to seek medical assistance. Within weeks, Anneliese's body began to waste away rapidly. She refused to eat, complained of dehydration, and was physically drained. During the sessions, they had difficulty holding her down as she screamed in response, sometimes hitting herself against pillows, and occasionally fainting by the end of the sessions. Despite her severe physical pain, Anneliese's family and the priests believed that the rituals would help her, so they continued the treatment. As the sessions progressed, it became increasingly evident that Anneliese's condition was deteriorating, and that she truly needed medical help. However, their belief in the exorcism rituals blinded the priests and family from seeking any medical assistance. Unfortunately, the failure to pursue medical intervention during this time would mark the beginning of the tragic path that led to Anneliese's death. Anneliese Michel's condition rapidly worsened from the first weeks of the exorcism sessions. Initially, the family, priests, and those around her hoped that the exorcism rituals would somehow show their effect with each passing day. However, with each new session, the young girl's condition continued to deteriorate. The strange reactions and changes occurring in her body deeply disturbed those observing her. Severe weight loss became one of Anneliese's most prominent and concerning physical symptoms. The young girl, who had once been healthy and vibrant, was losing control over her own body. She refused to eat and struggled to drink water, Her family believed the demons were trying to consume her, as they preferred to explain this situation as the result of demonic influence. Anneliese's weakening body had taken on a terrifying appearance from the outside. Her face had begun to change beyond recognition, her bones became prominent, and her eyes seemed to disappear into hollow sockets. Each day, her condition worsened. Parallel with the physical deterioration, Anneliese's mental state also worsened. During the sessions, she constantly saw hallucinations, typically involving demonic figures or horrifying entities that seemed to torment her endlessly. The confusion in Anneliese's mind was now manifesting outwardly. She continuously harmed herself, scratching her face, pulling her hair, attempting to break her wrists. Many times she inflicted serious harm on herself, yet she would return to the sessions experiencing the same pain again. The hallucinations vividly showcased how mentally broken Anneliese had become. The voices in her mind were telling her what the demons should do to her. Horrible and threatening whispers constantly filled her ears. The cruel acts the demons planned for her became more intense with each passing day, deepening the nightmare she was trapped in. Her family viewed the hallucinations and mental disturbances as the result of demonic influence and continued to act on this belief. Anneliese's face began to change continuously during the sessions. The priests believed that the demon continued to dominate her body, and the changes in her face appeared to them as a confirmation of this. The spasms in her face shook those watching her deeply, leaving them unsure of what to do to help. Her mouth would sometimes open in a strange way, her muscles would tremble uncontrollably, and her eyes seemed to disappear into a terrifying void. The spasms were so intense that even the priests hesitated to approach her. Her body appeared to be controlled by the demon, beyond her own will. The priests continued to perform every ritual they could to free Anneliese from the demons. However, no matter how much effort they put in, the young girl's condition kept worsening. Anneliese was no longer just physically drained but mentally exhausted as well. She screamed more frequently, her heart rate accelerated, and she had difficulty breathing. Her screams echoed throughout the house, but her family and the priests could only watch. Sadly, Anneliese's suffering did not ease with the sessions. On the contrary, it grew more intense with each passing day. Meanwhile, Anneliese's fear of death deepened daily. She constantly felt as though she was facing death and would often say things like, "I can't take this anymore." Her body had almost completely wasted away, and her mind was clouded. Spiritually and physically, the pain she was experiencing became unbearable. It was a painful state of feeling not just ill, but as though she were in the grip of a demon, suffering and breaking down. The priests continued to conduct even more intense and rigorous sessions to save Anneliese. They began reciting harsher prayers and hymns. The two priests persisted in performing all the rituals they could to expel the demons within her. Yet no matter how much effort they exerted, the sessions became increasingly difficult, and the young girl's condition continued to worsen. Anneliese's physical suffering distorted her face, further weakening her body. Anneliese was no longer just physically drained but emotionally and psychologically exhausted as well. She felt as though there was a demon within her, and she tried to defend herself against its presence and influence. But with each passing session, the demons pulled her deeper into a vortex, causing her to writhe in pain. Despite the priests and her family continuing to believe that the rituals would save her, the young girl's suffering only grew more intense with each passing day. Eventually, it became clear from all perspectives that physical recovery through the exorcism sessions was no longer possible. However, the priests and the family continued to believe that such an intensely performed ritual was a purely spiritual intervention, and they kept putting more effort into Anneliese's salvation. The truth, however, was that medical help should have been sought much earlier. But the priests and the family's beliefs prevented them from seeing this reality. This was another step down the path to disaster. Anneliese Michel's exorcism sessions were initially seen by her family and the priests as a hopeful solution. However, as time went on, it became increasingly clear that these rituals were not improving Anneliese's condition, but were, in fact, making it worse. The young girl's physical and mental state worsened with each passing day. As the family and priests viewed Anneliese's suffering as a problem caused by demonic entities tormenting her, They continued to ignore the need for medical intervention. The necessity of seeking medical help was becoming more apparent, but Anneliese's family continued to believe that the exorcism ritual was the only solution. Anneliese's condition was rapidly deteriorating, and this was a clear sign that medical intervention was needed. The young girl's body became progressively weaker. Her muscles started to contract, and her eyes became sunken from exhaustion. Anneliese refused to eat, only rarely consuming a few bites. When her family began to worry about her refusal to eat and her weakness, the priest provided only one explanation. The demons were continuing to harm her body, and this was seen as a kind of sign. In their eyes, Anneliese's physical distress was only a result of the demon's influence, and the best solution was to continue with the exorcism rituals. Meanwhile, the young girl's body desperately needed food and water, but they were trying to solve the issue with only religious rituals. In addition to her physical weakening, Anneliese's mental state also continued to decline. She began to see horrific hallucinations, her eyes seemingly lost in a void. These hallucinations constantly suggested that demons and other terrifying entities wanted to cause her harm. However, the priests continued to interpret Anneliese's physical and mental collapse as the result of demonic intervention. Her family related her psychological breakdown to the deepening influence of demonic forces. As time passed, the exorcism sessions became more intense. The priests increased the frequency of the rituals and began making each session longer. Anneliese was physically becoming more drained with each session, yet the priest continued to read more prayers and sing more hymns, believing that the rituals would eventually succeed. Each day, Anneliese faced more physical pain and emotional turmoil, and yet she did not improve. On the contrary, after each session, her condition worsened. But the priests, unwilling to view the exorcism ritual as a failure, chose to persist in the process instead of seeking medical help. Seeking medical help was not even on Anneliese's family's agenda at the time. The family was firmly committed to Catholic beliefs, and their faith in the exorcism rituals prevented them from searching for a logical or scientific solution. At that time, with the priest's influence, medical intervention was seen as entirely unnecessary and even harmful. The family believed that Anneliese's suffering would only end with a religious solution. Yet from a physical and mental health standpoint, it was evident that Anneliese needed medical treatment. However, the continued failure of the exorcism rituals prevented any medical assistance from being sought. Anneliese's family members and the priests ignored the real condition harming her, believing that the exorcism sessions would eventually bring her recovery. Despite recognizing that Anneliese was suffering from hunger, thirst, and exhaustion, they saw the exorcism process as an ongoing ritual that could not be stopped. Had medical intervention been sought, Anneliese's chances of survival could have greatly increased. With her body slowly wasting away, the absence of medical help brought her to the brink of death. The priest's mistake was particularly glaring. According to their beliefs, the exorcism sessions were seen as providing only a spiritual solution, not a treatment to relieve physical suffering. However, Anneliese's body and mind were completely exhausted. The priests believed that an exorcism would provide spiritual healing, but they ignored the physical and psychological issues. In reality, medical intervention could have played a far more crucial role in achieving true healing. Instead, the religious rituals, which increased daily, paved the way to Anneliese's death. Anneliese's family and the priests were determined to continue the sessions, believing they were doing what was right. However, this determination led to a chain of mistakes that ultimately caused the young girl's death. Rather than seeking medical help, and without considering any alternative solutions, the continuation of the exorcism sessions drove them toward tragic consequences. The family and the priests bore significant responsibility, as the necessary steps were not taken when Anneliese truly needed proper treatment. As a result, as Anneliese's painful deterioration continued, her physical and psychological suffering was ignored. The ongoing process leading to Anneliese's death highlighted how persistent they were, and how their religious beliefs prevented them from seeking a reasonable solution. This situation holds the responsibility for Anneliese's tragic death. Anneliese Michel's life tragically ended on July 1, 1976. The young girl lost her life due to the effects of hours-long exorcism sessions, starvation, dehydration, and physical exhaustion. Although her death was not considered a murder, it was recorded as a tragedy caused by negligence. Anneliese's death was not only a result of her family's and the priest's religious beliefs, but also highlighted how avoiding medical assistance led to her demise. The case echoed worldwide, dramatically revealing the significant differences between religious intervention and medical treatment and how it could result in death. After Anneliese's death, many details behind this tragedy began to emerge. First, Anneliese's death was confirmed by a medical report. The main contributing factors to her death were starvation, dehydration, and extreme physical exhaustion. Her body had endured excessive physical pain during the exorcism sessions, yet no medical help had been provided. Anneliese tried to survive amid intense sessions lasting hours a day and religious rituals. But throughout this process, she lacked proper nutrition, water, and rest. All these factors combined eventually led to the collapse of her body and the cessation of vital functions. The autopsy performed after her death revealed that Anneliese's body had been severely damaged by starvation and dehydration. The examinations showed signs of severe fluid loss, organ failure, and muscle atrophy. Her muscles were excessively weakened, and her body no longer had the energy to support its vital organs. Additionally, some areas of her brain showed signs of significant damage. In other words, the young girl was not just experiencing a spiritual collapse, but had also physically completely exhausted herself. This further exposed how harmful the exorcism sessions had been. As more information about the causes of Anneliese's death spread, the complexity of the case became apparent. Many people described her death as a result of neglect, as proper interventions had not been made when she needed help. The families and the priest's religious beliefs had acted as a barrier to medical treatment. When it became clear that the error leading to Anneliese's death had been unrecognized throughout the process, it sparked significant public outrage. The families and priests' refusal to seek medical assistance to save the young girl ignited a heated debate. Anneliese's family struggled to accept responsibility for the tragedy their daughter experienced. To them, the exorcism sessions were a matter of faith, and Anneliese's physical problems were seen as a result of religious interventions. However, after her death, it became clear that their beliefs had led to a grave mistake, and how that mistake paved the way for Anneliese's death. This was not only a tragedy but also a lesson. If proper medical assistance had been sought, the young girl's life could have been saved. However, traditional religious beliefs creating a barrier to scientific treatment, even in life-threatening situations, could have very serious consequences. After Anneliese's death, the full details of the case began to surface. Gradually, the mistakes made by the priests and the family became more apparent. The priests admitted that while performing the exorcism rituals, Anneliese's physical and mental state was completely ignored. In fact, early intervention regarding the young girl's physical health and mental condition might have saved her life. The families and the priests' misunderstanding during that time, unfortunately, cost Anneliese her life. Religious beliefs, rather than providing proper treatment, only condemned her to suffering. In the society, Anneliese's death sparked significant outrage. Many people saw it not only as a family mistake, but also as a tragedy resulting from the excessive extremity of religious beliefs. The details of the case sparked a huge debate, once again highlighting the vast differences between religion and science. People realized that saving a life requires not just faith but also medical intervention. Ultimately, Anneliese Michel's death was the result of the combination of religious beliefs and the lack of medical help. The mistakes made by her family and the priests not only cost Anneliese her life, but this tragedy also became a painful lesson for the world, emphasizing the importance of solutions born from the union of religion and scientific medicine. After this event, it became a warning for all societies to carefully consider both religious and medical perspectives to prevent similar tragedies from happening again. Following Anneliese Michel's death, it became inevitable that the responsible parties would be tried. The priests and the family, who had performed exorcism rituals based on their religious beliefs, had caused Anneliese's death, which deeply shocked both the public and the authorities. In 1978, a court trial began concerning the events leading to Anneliese's death and the responsible parties. The case had such a profound societal impact that it sparked global attention. People began questioning how dangerous such beliefs could be, as they had led to the death of a human being. The trial process became very complex and emotional. Despite the family's following of their religious beliefs, they were not found guilty of causing their daughter's death. However, the court did conclude that they had a significant responsibility, and they were considered guilty in a social sense. The family members' failure to recognize that Anneliese's severe and constant physical and mental pain could have been prevented by timely medical intervention led to them being socially condemned, even though they weren't found legally guilty. The family's beliefs led them to avoid seeking any medical intervention during the entire process. However, the court did not find a direct culprit. The family not only failed to find a solution to Anneliese's death, but also made a fatal mistake by preventing her from seeking medical help. The court mainly focused on the responsibility of the priests. Pastor Arnold Renz and Father Richard Koenig were tried for negligent manslaughter. The two priests had continued the exorcism rituals that led to Anneliese's death. The court clearly stated that instead of seeking a cure, these rituals worsened Anneliese's condition and ultimately led to her death. Both priests were found guilty and sentenced to prison. The court considered their religious beliefs as a barrier to seeking medical treatment to save a life, which was one of the main reasons they were found guilty. The court's decision caused a global stir. This case marked the beginning of a period where the limits of exorcism rituals and religious interventions were questioned. People clearly saw when religious rituals could become harmful and how such practices could threaten a person's life. The events leading to Anneliese's death were not only an individual tragedy, but also a warning about how dangerous religious beliefs could be in the face of contemporary medical knowledge and assistance. After the trial, serious debates emerged. In public opinion, some people saw the punishment of the priests as a fair decision, while others believed that the family's actions, based on their religious beliefs, were justified. However, after Anneliese's death, despite the different perspectives from both sides, almost everyone agreed on the importance of combining exorcism rituals with medical treatment. The trial became a lesson for both religious communities and healthcare professionals on how such practices should be regulated before they reach a point where they risk a person's life. Anneliese Michel's tragic death underscored the importance of combining medical help with religious rituals. It is essential that both religious beliefs and medical treatment coexist in a balanced manner. Before Anneliese's death, the priests and family prioritized a religious solution over medical intervention. However, this event clearly demonstrated how crucial the balance between religion and science is for preserving human life. The lesson learned from this tragedy serves as a warning to prevent similar occurrences in the future. Following the incident, debates around exorcism rituals and religious beliefs continued. Many medical professionals and religious leaders emphasized the need for medical intervention, stating that religious beliefs must always be combined with scientific data when dealing with such traumatic and dangerous situations. Anneliese's story will be remembered not only as a tragedy but also as an example of how the extreme and improper application of religion can end a life. In the end, the events following Anneliese Michel's death marked the beginning of significant changes in both religious and medical fields. The court's decisions taught how religion and science should work together to complement each other, and this tragic event provided essential lessons on how a society can better integrate faith and healthcare services.